Guys, what is going on? We are back. The curls are curling. I've just been having genuinely kind of one of those solid days. You know what I mean? Where you wake up early, you get stuff done. It's 1:30, folks, and I've already recorded another episode. I've already done the work I need to do for the project, for Honeydew. Already worked out. Already went on a run. Guys, it's just one of those fantastic days, to be honest. It's a bit of a solid day. So the thing that made it a little interesting for me, that be a bit of a dicey take, and we'll see what comes of it, right? But I was watching a YouTube short on Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about the gender thing. And I think a lot of people have got into the that space, and I think it's an interesting space, and I do ultimately want to get back to the project. This will just kind of be a hot take. Maybe we'll kind of do some of those. I know the episode I recorded earlier, I started talking about like Zillow, and so maybe I'll add some kind of podcast material, long form, into here, just kind of random topics. I know some of the episodes, or one of the episodes has like, we asked ChatGPT for podcast topics. So maybe we'll insert some podcast clips in here, and just kind of code on the side, right? But yeah, let's open it up with the idea of the gender conversation. I'll give it from, I guess, a software engineer's take. Right now I'm just pulling up the project on. What we did last episode was just add the columns to our database and to our endpoints. But I'm gonna break this down in a software engineering way because I this is how I've seen it kind of from the get go, and I hope it does everybody justice. I genuinely do. The intention is to do everybody justice in what I'm going to say. But of course you can't please everybody, so I'm not anticipating that outcome, So, but I do want a genuine response. I want a genuine articulated concept and an idea. Let's see what popped up. Oh, it's going to be that install. We'll go ahead and install it because we don't need to use Compass right now, and we have an opportunity to talk. So the gender thing, and for everybody who's lived in the age of now the 20s of the 2000th century or the 20th century, the 20s of the 20th century, right? The 2020s. We've seen this argument come up, or this really, really, really grave stance on male and female dynamics, and is there multiple genders and things like that. And I think what people are yearning for is they want to be viewed on how they view themselves, good, bad, or ugly, right? I think that's what people are ultimately yearning for. Now, does that pose an invitation to renegotiate with the thousands of years of kind of how we've done things? Potentially. Maybe there's an opportunity to do something different, right? And I'm speaking from an objective software engineer standpoint. You have to identify ideas initially as what they are. It's an idea. Could it be better? Could it be worse? Who knows? You kind of only know until you start pushing things into practicality. And I'm just going to speak on a software engineer's concept on this type of a topic. There's this thing called solid principles with software engineering, right? Solid principles, we'll say software, right? And they're basically software engineering design principles, kind of things to stand by. And we can kind of run through them, and it'll make sense. It'll all tie full circle to this hot take, if you will, right? So single responsibility means like you want your functions just to handle one single responsibility. So if we have a function of like get human name, right? Or get name, get user's name, right? All that function should do is just get the user's name. It shouldn't return math. It should just return the user's name. But we can build functions to do whatever we want, right? We can tell a function to say get user's name, and ultimately we can tell the function to do whatever. We could return 2 + 2. We can say const new string and make new name for a user, and we can do math in this equation if we want, like const math equals 2 + 2, and we could say return. And this is kind of software engineering stuff. So it is a hot take for those, and maybe a stretch take at this point for those not familiar with software engineering. But I imagine majority of my audience at this point is probably software engineers. But the point is that's one of our principles is your functions should just be single responsibility functions. But that's not the one that I'm kind of breaking this idea around. I believe we have open closed principle. What is this? No, I don't think it's this one. It might be Liskov. Let's see. Let QX be building off of the example. Okay. This means that every subclass or derived class should be subsuitable for their base or parent class. I think this is going to be the concept I'm talking about when it comes to this new idea of gender. Let's just run over a few others. I do think it's the Liskov. Let's see. Let's consider what would happen if we'd modify shape interface. Oh, maybe it's interface segregation principle. A client should never be forced to implement an interface that it doesn't use, or clients shouldn't be forced to depend on methods they don't use. Nope, that's not it. Well, I guess maybe to some degree you can tie that into this conversation, but I believe it's the Liskov principle. Let's just double check our thing. Let me just, objects of a superclass shall be replaceable with objects of its subclass without breaking the application. That is exactly the principle I want to talk about when we talk about this idea. So what? Let me pull up in a JSON thing because I also don't want to do the people of this idea disservice because I do think it's an honest idea, and I do think there's merit to the idea. So let's just pull open a document, right? Just hot take. When we look at the data of a person, right? Let's say human being, right? Human being or person, right? If you're trying to define the data and the traits of a person, there's things that we want, right? Like when we define our data models or our schema, right? Let's say we want persons. Well, you're going to have this array of objects, and each one of these objects are going to represent people. This is literally how we store users. For instance, if we say users, persons, humans, this is how we do it. It's an array of this, right? And within each one of these objects would technically be a user. And within each user, we're going to have things like username, right? So my name is Ryan, or you guys might know me as Pags. Most people know me as Pags. We're going to have a user ID. So with the government, this would be like your SSN, right? We're also going to have like a user email, right? We could say pags@example.com. We're going to have a user age. We're going to have all these things, right? Like think of your like ID, right? And I'm 28 years old. We're 28 years young. Think of like your ID, right? When you look at your ID, we have all these things that, say like user's address, right? User address at, 123 Main Street at, some state and with some zip code 12345, right? And we kind of have these variables that we've constructed society on. And what the Liskov principle means, at least when we talk about software, it means when you're implementing new data, we shouldn't go back and change things because it can break the entire application. It can break how everything's been done. If we build functions, right, that say, and I don't want to lose the party who's on the side of thinking, or the side of thinking of this new gender movement as a necessity, because let me disclose both sides before I lose everybody, right? But let's say we have functions that's like get user age, right? And we're building smaller applications on this. These are still good applications. They're still professional. But let's say we want to return user, and we're mapping through the users, and we want to turn the user, and we'll return the user.length, right? Or user.age. If we go back and change something here, I think that'll work, right? So we could probably just go like this, boom. I think that would return just the user's age. And maybe you would have a user ID you pass in or something. I'm not actually building the functionality here, but the concept is we can have an entire application, a huge structure built on this one component. And what the Liskov principle is if we need to affect user age in some way, let's say, let me think of a realistic example. Like maybe our application is like an alcohol application, and we've already constructed everything, and now we're just adding a new rule. Let's say there's a new law that passes, and it was a get user's age, and there's a new law that passes, and the new law is anybody over the age of 18 can now drink. So currently in the United States it's 21. In some other places of the world it's 18. But that you could see is a new law, a new regulation, a new piece of data, a new parameter, if you will, that's probably going to affect this. If we're going to say, maybe this function is return legal drinking age, right? And basically what we do here is return users that are over the age of 21. But what we're kind of doing in society is we have this Boolean value, right, of users' gender, right? It's either 1 or 0, right? It's either true or false. It's either male or female, right? Or it's been that way, right? Saying it's either been one of these two, true or false. And all they're just two pieces of thing that just represents, the male anatomy or the female anatomy, right? At least traditionally and history. And we've built, we might have applications with, especially in society, with like thousands of functions, thousands of things, right? And we're trying to change the parameters and the rules of this. And the Liskov principle is it's okay to embellish parameters. It's okay to build on top of functions, but you should never break the old thing that was working. That's roughly the idea of a Liskov principle is any superclass of something, it's an extension of the subclass. So let's think about this in maybe a user's role. If I'm an admin, let's say you're a user of our application, you would have access, let's say, user routes. This is like where can a user navigate on the application? Maybe they can navigate to the home page. Maybe they can navigate to like the customer page, right? Maybe they can navigate to the shopping page, right? Here's another realistic example. So this is like our user account, like one of our customer accounts, if you will, right? Like customer. Let's say we also want to store admin accounts. And maybe this is admin1, right? Admin1, password is 111, right? And email, it's admin, all this stuff, right? Lives on 123 admin street, so on and so forth. The Liskov principle goes as far as saying, well, if I'm the admin, I should be an extension of the customer. So basically an extension of like extends customer, meaning you should have access to all of these routes. So basically you'd say customer user routes. you would have access to all the customer user routes and more. We'd say maybe the admin page, maybe the settings page, maybe you can change cart page, right? Like you can affect what's the cart items, right? Change cart items or change shopping items, right? Like maybe you have more access. And the principle goes to show that thinking of data structures in this way, and these are just like tiny examples. You can imagine if you build an entire application, whether it's something functional based, whether it's something data based, or when you look at React applications, right? When you look at traditional TSX classes, so these are functional components, but when you look at class components in React, it's let's say class.tsx. You have a class extends, right? Extends component. And you're going to import these things, let's see, from React. So this is how a class component starts, is it extends on, we'll say class new component, right? I believe it's something like this, right? But it's saying it extends on this thing, meaning this thing already exists. This component already exists. And now whatever we build on top of it, it's an extension beyond the original component. So that's how quality software is built. We have principles built around that. And that's literally how these companies are navigating and building these brilliant ideas. So I say this to be resolute to the 2020s argument of this data issue, where people are trying to retrofit, hey, we do have more genders, we do have more this, that, and the other. And I'm not here to argue that. I'm not here to discredit how people want to feel and want to be addressed. We live in America, you know what I mean? Like do as you wish. I who am I to judge, right? That is not the point of this. The point I'm simply suggesting, and I think a point that would satisfy both parties of this argument is to redefine the data structure in a way that embellishes upon what's already previously existed. So maybe instead of user gender in the sense of we just had male or female, perhaps we can also embellish an object, right? And this object can have user wants to be identified as, right? And here in this object, you can say whatever they would like. You could be whatever identity you would like to take on. If it's a feminine identity, more power to you. If it's a masculine identity, more power to you. If it's one of the new ones that we're unfamiliar with, these, more power to you. But the point is, and for those of you wondering syntactically in the non-software space, right? These pipes are saying or. So it could be this, or this. Right? That could be one approach to solve the problem is, okay, just embellish it all, but you still have to maintain these. But that doesn't satisfy. That's what the prior data structure was, right? Was just this. And this is what people are trying to do. Say, well, I want to add whatever I want here. And that is esteemable to attempt to try. But I suggest a better thing is to add a new field to somebody's ID. So maybe we still maintain gender, right? So in hopes of keeping the same systems and satisfying the people who don't agree with that, maybe you still need to address those people. Because a lot of people will say, oh my God, you're wrong, you're racist, but it's a lot of the population. It's 70-80% of the population is what people are showing. Maybe even more, perhaps more. But that's not to discredit the people who still desire this new thing. And you could say user identify as. Just add a new property, a new state on the field, and have this in conjunction with this previous one. So just add what do people want to be addressed as? And I think that, you know, if they're they, them, they, they're, you know, this, that, the other, as long as it maintains the Liskov principle that we can still live a society where people don't need to change what's already worked. Because in a very parallel sense to software, you don't want to break a system that's proven to at least work. But we do always want to embellish on things. We do always want to innovate. We always want to push and see if we can find better solutions. And this is where I advocate, where it somewhat makes sense from a software engineering standpoint to extend upon this. So I guess technically the class we would be building, right, is like class human, right? And we could build these things. I think we'd have a constructor, right? And we'd have like name, ID, like, or I guess your SSN, right? Your gender, and all these things would then pop down of, you know, name equals this dot name, SSN equals this dot SSN. You'd instantiate all of your class things. And this is human, let's say prior to 2020. And this is not to scold or make fun of, by the way. This is a genuine talking point. This is not saying humans before 2020, like we were different. But there is this thing in history that you understand, that people take on new data. People take on new ideas, because the same way we described humans, let's say humans prior to, let's say the 1900s, right? Or forgive me, the 1800s. There we could make a data piece on the humans prior to the 1800s. We could make a data piece is believes can fly. Like that would actually be a Boolean value that you could technically extend upon the humans prior to 1800s. Because most people, like for these things, right? If I were to build a human prior to the 1800s, most people would say false to this thing. So I know that kind of doesn't make sense, but basically I would say my name is Ryan, my SSN is 123, my gender, we can say male for myself, and believes can fly. Well, false. I didn't believe that then. So when I describe humans prior to 2020, this is a genuine thing. You can actually do this across across other things, and you could see how the data would actually just build in these massive data structures. Because we wouldn't have believes can fly. We'd also say believes in Salem witch trials, right? Or you can go back to older versions of human beings, and we can walk through this here. I'll show you guys. Right? So, but the point is you actually don't need to keep recreating humans every time you embellish a new thing. So we could say false. We can all we actually need to do is say humans prior to 1800s extends upon the humans prior to the 1700s, right? And we actually don't need to include all these other things, all these Salem witch trials. Let's say belief can fly at this point is a thing. We just need to add this one. And now our object, when we return, sorry, we don't have this one. Now when we have an object, right? And this is kind of far-fetched for people who don't understand software engineering. But now when we look at an object, it's going to have a name, it's going to have an SSN, it's going to have a gender, it's going to believe in Salem witch trials. As more people learned back in the 1800s, maybe it was true, but back in the 1700s, maybe it was true. Forgive me on the history. I don't know the timeline of all these things, but prior to the 1800s, most people would say false on that. And in the 1700s, most people would say true on that's all we need. We would just need my name, this, that, the other, and true on believes in Salem witch trials. But more data comes out, more books get wrote, more technology comes out, and we're like, okay, well, believing in Salem witch trials is actually a false thing. Like we all roughly understand, probably was a bit of a fugazi, probably wasn't real, right? But what we can do is extend on the humans from the 1700s. So now we don't need to include all of these other things. They're already assumed. All we need to add is just believes can fly. And like the Wright brothers, it was actually a false thing. But then the humans of the 1900s came out, and the humans of the 1900s are just extensions of the humans prior to the 1800s. And maybe we didn't believe we could fly, but maybe we believed in, let's say cars, like Ford Model T, right? Like production cars, right? So this will make sense in a moment. I know it's kind of far-fetched from the software, but now when we return this object of the humans that we're now building or birthing in the 1900s, I know this is like a really nerdy or software engineered way to talk about people, but not the humans built in the 1900s, they come pre-packaged with all of this stuff, right? It's already pre-packaged with the Salem witch trials, everything that we had initiated the humans born here. They also come with this, they're assumed with this, and we embellished a new thing on top of them. So it's a Liskov principle, right? We're building on top of the things that already existed. So we just keep that up, and now we have the humans prior to, right, 2020. And that extends on humans prior to the ones before them in the 1900s. So we've already had this idea of gender. We've already figured out we don't believe in the Salem witch trials. Now we figure out we believe we could fly in the sense of like airlines and planes. And now, and forgive me on the order of things. I don't know if planes came first, then production cars, or vice versa. But now we have, all these things that we can now extend upon, right? So now we have believes in this, we have believes can fly, believes in Salem witch trials, believed in production cars, or maybe knows how to drive production cars, right? And now by the end of everything, we end up with a larger object. And people are trying to say, well, we don't want gender. We want to change this. But you're not just changing it here. You now have to rewrite history and data going back a lot. And you have to imagine all the books, all the laws, all the regulations, all the stuff that humans have built, the systems, whether they're good or bad, whether they're wrong or correct. But you now have to correct all the way back from, and this is just the 1700s, and we're doing really small microcosms of data, right? You got to do the humans from the 1600s. You got to go all the way back to the humans who first learned how to build fire, and you got to build the data structure around those humans, right? And you can see really quickly that, well, we can't just change that. We can't just instantly change it in the way that I think people are attempting to. And it's not because we don't want to. It's because we simply cannot. Because who's to say that the humans alive today are very smart people? But are we smarter than the extension of the thousands, the billions and billions of humans prior to us? And I would argue that's a very arrogant place to be as a human, to say that we know better than all of humanity, 99.9% behind us. That's a very naive way of thinking. Again, because we can look at the humans behind us, and we could poke holes in all of their logic, right? So the humans in the 1600s, right? Maybe they like beat women and forgive me for the vulgarness, but like, made love to their internal families. And then people realized, oh, we can't do that. We need laws against marrying your cousin. We need laws against beating women. We need laws. Like, think in the 1800s, like people believed in racism. They, at some point in time, actually believed it was okay to own a slave. Now, us humans in the early 2000s, we have the luxury to say, well, gosh, that's absolutely wrong. Who would do that? But the humans in the 1700s didn't know that. The humans in the 1600s didn't have that same awareness, good or bad, right? And I'm not obviously retrospectively, we're spoiled. We could say horrible looking back, right? But life can only be extended upon. And I think that's where the argument isn't to say, get rid of gender on the ID card. Don't do that. Extend upon it. So back when we're building these user objects of an admin or a customer, right? Effectively, all these classes, all these do for the non-software engineers, all it would do is just pop out this on the other side is an object with all these things, right? Whatever we described them on. So this would just be name, right? Our SSN, our gender, right? Just however we built this thing, believes in Salem's witch trials. Whatever we put in this class, it would just pop out with an object like this, right? So let me get rid of all this extra noise. Let's get back to our thing here. To me, the most sensible thing, if we have user gender, we can have male. The most sensible thing isn't to say, let's delete this and let's remove it. Let's adjust this piece of data. Let's extend upon it because it allows for both parties, both the people who say, no, there's only male and female, and the people who are like, no, I really don't feel that way. I don't see life that way. I think what people are trying to go for, and this doesn't need to be user gender. You could rename it in the past. You could also reinstantiate redefine the key value to this object, but you can't redefine the value because we've simply said is male anatomy or female anatomy. That's all we've made the key value here is just the gender, right? Just some biological differences, right? Biological difference, right? And perhaps what we need to do is extend upon that and say how people want to be identified. I don't see a problem with it. I genuinely don't. I genuinely don't, because we still maintain some sort of thing. Otherwise, if it was never a relevant thing, why was it ever defined as different? Right? If water was different from coffee, or if water was the same as coffee, why did we ever define coffee different from water? Why do we have different words for the same thing? And that's not an excuse to say that there's same things that represent different things, right? Same words that represent different things. Because just because humans put our label on something, it doesn't actually identify the thing, right? Like this mouse, for instance, only we describe it as a mouse. And this is getting into meta thinking. And I think this is why I'm a decent software engineer, is because software engineering is about meta thinking. You have to think about the thing behind the thing. And the mouse itself doesn't know it's a mouse. The rock itself doesn't know it's a rock. Like we call whales whales, but whales are actually really hyper intelligent animals. They might have completely different languages and completely different words and terminology for describing the same things we describe. They might call a shark something entirely different. They may not identify a shark as a fish. In our brains, we look at all ocean life as fishes or as some sort of, water creature, right? But you got to think of the context that a water creature lives in. They probably don't define other water creatures as as fish. They're like, oh, that's no different than, us looking at a bear. Now, this is a stretch of meta thinking away from this conversation. But the idea is, I think people get really wrapped up in sticking to the key value here of, let's call this gender, or let's call it something else. You could label it anything else in the world. Keep it the same concept of it. It identifies whether someone has male anatomy or female anatomy, but then extend about it on how people want to be addressed. What gender do you align with? And that, folks, is why I should go for president, I believe, because you could. I don't see a problem if someone says, hey, I'm a woman, but I feel like a masculine woman, right? Like, or hey, I'm a man, but I feel like an even more masculine man, right? Like you can have those identifiers. You can have those things, or you want to identify as a woman, right? That's completely fine. You want to identify as whatever you want. Like I said, who am I to judge? I am no better than the next man. So it's wrong for me to judge and say, oh, you want to identify as a Zer. I personally am unfamiliar with it, but no different than what we said, the humans prior to the 1900s, right? Prior to 1900s, right? Some or whichever class we defined. Some of them may have believed in Salem witch trials. Some of them may not have. But when we get to the humans, let's say, in the 3000s, we basically want to make sure that their data structure is more optimized than ours currently. That's humans doing a good job. Is you leave the world a better place. You make it better for your children. You make it better for the future. That's humans doing a good job. So I don't disagree with having the conversation on, clearly there's a big enough thing that the conversation needs to be had, that people want to change, this parameter right here, or this key value. But I'm simply advocating, due to the Liskov principle, not to retroactively change it. But how about on our identity, where there's a gender thing, have a sex thing too, or have a sex thing identify the gender, and then have the gender thing identify how you feel. Like it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter to me. You could call this one user sex, and you can call this one user gender. And you have an embellishment that still maintains all of the prior things that have worked in society, but it still keeps the opportunity for innovations and potential optimizations in the future. Whichever one is labeled which. I'm not keen on the thing, but it could be flipped the other way, or it could be this way, right? And I believe that is actually a healthy middle ground between this thinking, between this huge argument that nobody wants to talk about and nobody wants to really break down. But I hope that helps. Anyway, that's a long bit. Let's dive into some software. But the ultimate point is even myself and humans no different than myself. We like to look around in the world and think we have all the answers. But you don't have the answers, Sway. You don't have the answers, Sway. Not everybody does, and there's I really need one of those push buttons that goes like meh, 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 and like I can cut up audio things and have something like this where Kanye, you don't have the answers, Sway. That would be so funny. But the point is even to my own current beliefs of me saying, well, I think keeping a male and female thing seems to be a user gender or user sex, and then you can embellish upon that and have a user sex as well, or whichever token key value storage you want to have. But my thinking can absolutely be wrong too. right? It's no different than the humans in the 1700s, and you're asking them to build a societal structure for the 2000s. Well, we're just trying our best. Like, we're trying our very best. It doesn't mean I'm going to be right about it too. But that's kind of my middle take, where I think I get made fun of from both sides of people. Like I've had that same discussion with people who are very much on we'll call it the left side of the political party, and I get chewed in pretty hard on, called a ton of names, and then on the flip side, I've had that conversation with what we'll call the right wing of the political party, and I get made fun of, and like, oh, you dirty software engineer hippie, you, and so there's no winning for me is what I realized. So part of it is even wondering if I should post this, but and just keep my nose out of it. But I do think that seems like a healthy middle ground that can address and encompass the most people. For like it's a Venn diagram. I think that's the thing that can potentially encompass both thinkings, where we maintain the previous functionalities, but also allow the innovation and possible optimizations for future functionalities that don't exist today. So that's good software engineering in a nutshell. Speaking of, let's get back into some software now, folks. Thanks for sitting on my hot take. But yeah, so let's dive back in. Let's get off a hot take, and I really don't mean it to be a hot take. I'm happy to have conversations with people and always learn. You know what I mean? Always learn, right? But I do feel like I have a mind that does have the answer sway. Potentially could have some embellishments for society sway. You know, so let's get back to the task column at hand, though. So we were building this task column from yesterday or from earlier today rather, and we have this modal where we can add task columns as users need them. So what we wanted to do was add an update endpoint, or potentially add an update endpoint, but definitely add a delete column. And then, well, maybe we don't want to add a delete column though, because it needs to delete all the tasks associated to that column as well. So we're going to need to think about that, right? Because it would have to delete all the tasks. So maybe we'll say, are you sure? Do you want to delete all the 37 tasks associated with this as well? We saw some of our functionality talk there. But we really don't want to delete things, right, just blindly. So if someone needs to know for sure, like, I am sure I'm deleting this column, no questions asked. And one final thing before leaving that kind of hotter take or political discussion, I've genuinely never voted in my life too. I don't belong to the political parties. And I don't knock anybody who does. I'm not here to say, you know, how to live anybody's life or what to do. I love conservative people. I love liberal people. I've genuinely never voted. It's not for me. It's not my thing. So, and I'm not knocking people who do. You know, I'm just focused on building stuff. So please don't harass me on all the other stuff. It's just a simple thought, you know, that I've had that I think answers a lot of questions for people on both sides, but maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, let's dive in. Let's get back to what we need to do. So where the task column ID is equal to the task column ID, right? Now, I remember briefly that we had to do something. gosh, it is so hot in my apartment right now. It truly was a hot take. Truly was a hot take. But I remember vaguely we needed to do something with the task column ID when we did the queries, or with the rec.queries, we needed to do something with the rec.query. I forget exactly precisely what we need to do, but there was something we needed to do. I vaguely forget. So here's our delete endpoint, but we don't actually use it there. It's rec.query. Was it the atomic function that, well, obviously we'll need to do that when deleting the column. We'll need to atomically delete all the tasks as well associated to that column. So, it was the send with an empty object, I think. I believe that was it. Okay, so we'll see. Boom, res.send. Let's see what the rec.column ID is. String is not assignable to. But I'm only deleting one, right? So I feel like this shouldn't be an error right here. Right now we're just trying to add some sort of delete functionality, right? Say delete task column. And we'll do a try catch, of course. And we'll do boom, boom, boom. Do a delete request. And it won't be task column name that we delete. We don't want to do that. We want to do task column ID. So we need to pass that in, which is going to be here. And we actually need to, I know exactly what we need to do. Well, we could either do it as a payload, right? Or we could do it as a parameter. I think we're gonna have to do it as a parameter. So that would be us doing a parameter where we pass it on the back there. And what we can do is get this task column ID into our task store, right? Or tasks store. Excuse me, we have a task column here, but this won't actually get our ID. We need to add a folder that says task column, right? And we need to do the same thing here where we have this parameter or this brackets around around our parameter. And we need to utilize this for our functionality because this will allow us to get the task column, the specific column ID that we need. So let's steal this functionality here. I'm going to remove this, the update for now, don't want it. Delete task. We've already built out the delete task. So let's go ahead and grab that. I'm going to remove the task ID, or excuse me, we've already built out the delete task column. So let's grab that out of there and we will simply plug it in. Looks like we can actually model some of this stuff or steal some of the guard clauses. For instance, this one right here. If no column ID, throw an error. Right, so that helps us, right? We got a 204, we send that. And let's see what else is going on with this error here. Because it looks like we're still having some sort of error, some sort of functionality, right? We don't want to delete the task, we want to delete the task column. I guess that would have been an appropriate time to look at the ID. So where string, oh, that might be why we might need to stringify this. Okay. So boom, let's pop this in as a string. And gosh, let's see, task ID is required. We'll say column task ID is required, excuse me. Sorry guys, that was a bit of a hot take. It's pushed me in my into a weird place for me a bit where it feels to be an appropriate, like a genuinely a attempt for understanding is I guess my take out of that conversation. But it's tough. It's hard to talk about those things, in today's world. I feel like people make it so eggshelly where I'm a human. I'm not 100% perfect, right? I'm like a 90%er type guy, 80%er, meaning, I try my best, but there's gonna be times where I don't say what I 100% meant to say, or maybe my message didn't get across all the way. But I do stand by the fundamental idea that I think that's something where people could genuinely stop getting in tiffs. I feel like over just simple embellishments. I look at software engineering problems too, like very, very paramount in that way too, where and I don't mean to be arrogant by saying it, but I've looked at people who I'm like, you're redesigning so much extra stuff. You're making this function, call this function, do this, that, and it's like you just need to do this simple thing. Problem solved. So that's kind of my understanding of it, of a lot of things in the world, and I think people used to call me really, really remarkable things, like all these like really horrifying bad things, right? And all paramount to basically inferring lower intelligence. And it's tough to hear that when you do have a pure heart and you genuinely can see solutions for problems rapidly, like rapid prototyping type thing. And that to me is where, and I don't know, I don't want to get too arrogant either, but that to me, it feels like there's an opportunity there, because there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of energy being allocated to that, and seeing that new thing pop up with many celebrities and many people and many things. It's really, 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 it's really interesting, right? Where maybe it doesn't need to be as convoluted, right? Maybe there's an opportunity for simplification. That's how you know I'm a software engineer. It's amazing. That is amazing. That is truly, truly remarkable. I really felt like that came across authentically, though. I really do. So, but let's get back to the material of base column. Oh, and I do want to wrap all this stuff too into base columns, where it's kind of a self-contained component. I know I talked about that yesterday, where I want these contained components within themselves, where let's see, I think it would be from here to here, where the page doesn't actually handle the Lego bricks. The Lego bricks handle the Lego bricks. So that's the goal of this real quick. Let me in the middle of us doing this, let me pop out and make base columns. So we already have a column, but that only represents one column, right? We also want to we also want to have columns, right? And that's going to be these guys. Everything that goes into there, that's going to be all of our columns, all of our columns. So we can actually take this material, pop it into our methods, right? Actually don't use that, so this will no longer be there. I think task store, I think all this stuff actually, yeah, belongs here. So our state there, task store there. Really need to start organizing the components a little bit better. This is actually our method here. And this is our column modal content. So we could say our, what do we call them? Template, our method, our functional render components maybe. Render methods, right? Sounds about right. And we could pop in the task store and also the base modal. Oh, and it looks like use state, use effect. So let's get that out of there. We don't need that here. Oh, we need to steal the use state. Pop that over and put it in our life cycle here. Boom. Say life cycle right here. Okay. And of course, we don't need to go to the components folder. We're already in the components folder, so I think that'll work. We don't need to go out that far to the store. I think just right there. That handles that error. So what else are we missing? Oh, the base column. And boom. Let's import the base column again. Don't need to go out of the folder and into the components folder. We're already in the components folder, and boom. The only thing we need to do now is just import it, see if it works. Let's see, import base columns. Not column, but columns. And let's see. Be a really, really beautiful structure and architecture if this was valid here. Let's see. We might have some export issue because I don't think we labeled the template proper within the columns. Let's go check that out. We have base React component. Let's rename it to base columns. And I think that might do it. Just like that, folks. So now our pages, and this is how I want our pages again. If we need to add this columns component, it's all self-contained. It's all everything that we see, the task button, the add column, all of it's handled within our base columns. Within our base columns, we can break it down. We see we have a column. We see we have other things. If we need to edit those things, it's going to be within this component. If we need to edit our tasks and stuff, I like that structure basically where the components are all maybe nested and connected with each other. The state's all in the store. And the pages are just handling how the Lego bricks are laid. That is all I want the pages to do, because again, if we need something like and this is what we talked about last episode, if we need the base project percentage, base completed task is what it renamed it to, but you can see it's pulling it from here. I think that's just somewhere in the memory of the application. But you can see if we pull in a component, it should just handle itself. All the logic, all the data, all the stuff, boom, it's handled here. Now, of course, we have some absolute positioning errors and things like that, but roughly the idea maintains to be true, that if we need that component, we can just pop it in, not a problem. I just want the pages to organize the Lego bricks as a whole. So I hope that makes sense. Let's go to the base columns real quick. Let's get back over there, and we want to add now this delete column function. And I think how to do that is, do we have a column index? We do, and we also need the column. Let's see, should be task column. was it ID? Is what we called it, I believe, in Prisma? Task column ID. Okay, cool. We did. So right now it's throwing a red underline because we aren't pulling that into the base column. So let's go ahead and include that into our column. So we have column index. Let's see, column ID, which I believe is a string. Actually, we'll make that required. Every column should have an ID. And now that column ID, we should see it populate if I pop it here at the top of the columns. And we can now use this ID. Basically, this is column ID 1, if you want to call it. Column ID 2, column ID 3. I know it looks like a fancy dancy long string, but end of the day, it's just column ID 1, column ID 2, unique column ID 3, unique column ID 4. Basically, unique column ID 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Or 5, or however many we need, right? And we want to pass in from the task store, we have that button to delete column. And we have an on click. We can say task store, delete task column, and we want to pass in this ID, our fancy dancy ID for basically saying column 1, column 2, column 3. So we'll have delete column. Let's make a background red 500 just so we have a, and we'll make it proper. But we just have a button for now to at least show us that we're able to delete this column. And I bet we're going to get some errors within the client or within the server side of the application saying, well, you can't delete the column because it's going to delete these other tasks. And it's also going to delete the task statuses. So we need an atomic function that deletes tasks, task statuses, and task columns all in one go. So let's look at our task column delete endpoint real quick and just make sure that we're receiving the column ID. So here is our store. We'll pop it in here. Make sure we're getting it into the store from store. And then we will also go to the task column and we'll get task columns. We're already doing that. Here's our task column here. Oh, this is not what we want. We want task column ID, forgive me. And we want to just console log to make sure we're receiving task column ID. So let's try that on for size. Let's see if we get it in our store and our server, and let's see if it deletes the task column. So we got an error deleting this 404 not found. And we didn't see it here. So I didn't see anything from the store either, which tells me we are doing something wrong here. Let's hard refresh. If you hit shift and refresh, you should do a hard refresh. Let's go ahead and delete. Okay, so we have this from store. Great. So we're seeing it from the store. And we have a 404, meaning it's not found. Task column ID is not found. Task columns. Interesting. So it's going to the endpoint API. It's going to / task columns. And we are in task call, or not this one. We should be getting task column ID, which is right here, this parameter right here. And this parameter we're calling from rec.query. We should ultimately see it here, but we're getting an error between the client and server. Delete task columns. Oh, is there 3 of these? Oh no, just 2. Okay, let me pop that down a little. Okay, let me zoom out. Sorry guys, I know guys have asked many times to zoom in more, but I do need to debug this really quick and then I'll zoom back in. Let's see, so delete task columns. I'm gonna rename it to task column. And we'll need to rename that across the application and base column. It won't be delete columns. It will be delete column. So interesting. So we get it here. Let's refresh. Let's see if it's deleted one. Sometimes it does that, right? So we have 4 of them. Error. We have an error right here. And we had that 404, similar thing. Bad request. Response, it's giving me an HTML response. So what does that mean? Do we need to do res.send? But we're not even seeing the task column ID coming from rec.query, right? Let's see. Gosh, I'm tired. But doing this delete is certainly one thing we want to do today. The other thing we want to do is also configure the task columns that we can assign them to is going to pop up here. And then we also need to configure our project completion component, because our project completion component is based on the done string, but we need to base it on the last indexed column is actually what we need to do, I believe. So, or we can always render a done column, like a completed column of some sort. No matter what, just always append a deleted column, or excuse me, a completed column. So let's think about that. Let's think how to build for that potentially. I think that would be a consistent user experience where you can always put task into the completed column. But let's fix this. Why is this being a problem? So we get the response, right? Let's console log both of these. We get error. Unless that was it. Unless that did a 200 response. No. Okay. API/columns 404 not found. Why? Why is that not found? We see it in the column. I believe we see it in the store, right? So we have the column ID right here. Right? That's our column IDs. And say as string, right? Or technically I can go to the test store and make sure it's not even a string, but we can actually make sure it's a test column, right? Or test column ID. I believe, maybe. Test columns. No, we'll just keep it a string, right? But we see it come from the store. We do see that. So if I delete, it'll show the ID of the exact column that we want to delete, which is a different ID from this column. This one starts with 9DE and so on and so forth. And this one starts with C96 and so on and so forth. So it does that. And then why is our delete endpoint? We have axios.delete. Maybe we won't get columns for right now. Let's just work on the functionality. Let me look at the delete task here. What did we do different? Doesn't look like we did very much differently, right? We have our Axios, we have our delete endpoint. And instead of API/task, we just have API/, well, maybe that's our problem. It's a task column. Oh, that is our problem right there. It's all about precision, folks. Precision is everything. So task-column was our bug, I believe. Let's give it a go. We might have another bug now. Let's crash the server. Try it one more time. I'm going to remove the request and response, and let's see the ID from backend. If it works in the backend, or at least if we see the ID in the backend, we will not have to configure anything in the store. So we saw it there. Boom, Axios error. It did take a second though, so interesting. We should see the from backend right here, down here in the it's still saying task columns here, but it's not task columns anymore. We made it task column, I believe, right? API/task column. Yep, that is correct. So, and it's task column here. Oh, I wonder if it's trying to go to task column now, but it shouldn't. That doesn't make sense because nothing's pointing to it, right? Well, this is pointing to it, API/task columns, but this is not pointing to it. So let's kill the server. Let's try one more time. We don't want task columns. We want this one right here, task ID. Deleting a specific task column. Let's try. Click. Boom. Compiling error client and server error. Still deleting API/task columns, so on and so forth. So, API/task columns. Maybe I can rename this to task columns and see. I thought that was the error we were having with the task was the next router was not necessarily able to decipher task file from task folder. So let's see. So we're refreshed. Let's see if we can still query the columns. It may have an issue. Doesn't have an issue. Looks like it's fetching a lot though. Let's delete. Oh, boom. A body was attempted from the backend. Okay, really interesting. Really interesting. So maybe that worked. Let's see. Folks, he does it all. He does it all. Politics, data structures, task columns. He does it all, folks. He does it all. Okay, enough gassing myself up, right? God likes when we humble ourselves before he has to humble us, right? So let me retract a bit of the arrogance, right? Let's dive. Let's stay on target. Stay on the course, right? So we have our delete column. I just want to make it a small icon, like a little X, and we want it to be a modal that says, "Hey, are you sure? Are you sure you want to delete this?" And I wonder how this is going to work with tasks and task statuses. I think that's going to be an interesting thing. We're going to have to omit the tasks, all the task IDs from the tasks in the column. Every time I say task, I always emphasize the tasks, the extra KS, because if I say tasks like really quick, it just sounds like task, like one uniform task. So I'm emphasizing the tasks. But okay, so let's think about this. Let's think. So the delete column is working, at least for now, which is perfect. The other additional thing that we wanted to do today that I think is important and we can probably knock out relatively quick is all of these columns that exist. Let's just go ahead and delete one. Maybe I can actually fetch the task columns after deleting them. So let's see. Boom. If it deletes them successfully. Did it fetch? No. Oh, maybe it didn't delete it though. Okay, so let's try one more time. Delete it. Prisma client. This is the 10th instance of Prisma client being started. Make sure this is intentional. Body was attempted. Okay. I wonder if it's saying you don't need this many Prisma clients or something. Okay. Test. Okay, we just built out a bunch of columns. Looks like we're having to. Oh, this might be a similar reactivity issue where the column itself it doesn't know it's being deleted, or the other columns don't know it's being deleted. So, but the function still should work, right? But how I imagine it working is the actual base column, this file, right? Like when we post another column, it's like generating a new file, right? It's generating all the software that says all this, right? Like each one of those. So when I press delete right here, this entire file is like, boop, delete, gone. So he's gone, that file, and there's 3 prints of this file, right? Or now 2 prints of this file. And when I press delete, I think when it deletes, yeah, I think it's deleting it and not fetching new columns, right? So, yeah, we'll have to think about that reactivity too. But it might just be a basic use effect or something, or you know, just awaiting the right place or something. You know, maybe we'll try to reverse the order of these. But let's go ahead and get the bigger of the problems here, which is getting these column header names into our modal there. So let's add that one, test, and we want, and we also again we'll add a modal for the delete column, because that's kind of a bigger deal. That's a bit of a bigger deal to delete an entire column. Deleting a task is like still something where like, hey, are you sure? But deleting a column is a little bit of a larger deal, right? So maybe we'll have to think about that backlog, and maybe that's where those tasks can go for that column is just boom, we'll kick them off to the backlog. Or we can do, are you sure? And kick them off to the backlog. That could be 2 solutions for that problem. But let's go to the base column, forgive me, one of the columns. And we want to look at our popovers, or our modals, excuse me. So we have the post modal content, both of our post modals, right? We have this, these drop downs, these status drop downs, if you call them, right? And I think what we want to do is, where is that, right? We have status right there, status. Let's go down. I think what we kind of want to do, right? Oh, but this is going to change a lot because we are also going to need to print functions according to these columns. Well, we'll deal with that reactivity in a bit, because we still didn't find a solution for that. So let's maybe not let that kill what we want to do. So, oh, boom, right here, our options. So these options right here, I don't think it's going to be too hard. We just say task store, task columns, right? Dot map, maybe. We'll say task column. And we can return, maybe it's task column dot task column name. I think that's all we needed to do potentially. But I don't know if that keeps it in a map. I feel like it should, right? So let's do one of these, right? Task column headers, or task column options, we'll call it. And let's return this. And we will pop that into our options again. And let's see if that fixes our issue. And I will console log, right? We'll say task column options array. And that we're getting a red underline because that doesn't exist. Saying task column options array. It's going to be this. It's going to be this whole thing. So we want this to be an array that gets populated, right? Oh, we've got an issue. It's going way too quick, right? So where's our issue? Somewhere over here. What did I break? Options. Oh, right here. Okay. Okay, well, we'll just remove it for now. Oh, we're going to get an underline, of course. But that shouldn't break it, right? Div is some sort of identifier div issue I saw. Okay, so we now have... Oh, I see. I see if there's a weight issue potentially. Because I don't think we're fetching the task columns here. But what we can do is I think we're passing them here, so we can pass them in to... Oh, we are passing the task columns or the individual headers, but the components themselves, they don't know about the other columns. So let's account for that. Task columns, we need to include that into our props. Task columns, and what type is it going to be? You guessed it, folks, something from our Prisma client. That's right. So task columns, perfect. We have the perfect type for it as well. And instead of saying task store.task columns, we can actually just say task columns. No, I didn't mean task column ID. I meant task columns. Oh, I never passed them in as a prop. Forgive me. Forgive me, folks. And now it's saying map does not exist on task columns. But I would disagree. I would disagree. I think it does exist on task columns. And the issue we're now going to be facing, right? Let's see. Something around the options that we don't have it passed in. So it looks like we have a base dropped in. Oh, you know what? That was the wrong thing that I put the options in. I didn't mean it in the priority. We actually do want this priority just to be low, an option of low, medium, high. But we want those other options, boom, from here. And I believe that's all we need to do to assign the task to the column. I don't think we configured for task or column IDs, which may be good to do for the task, like post the column to the, or post the task to the column ID would feel like a really robust thing to do. But let's maybe give it a go. See if this works, right? Say medium priority. Test success. Let's refresh. Let's see if these columns kind of can query these tasks. Oh, nice. Okay. Now, which one did we do? We did test or we did from here. So we'll say task 1. Make sure we're still working, right? And it's going to go to the test column. Boom. And there it is. Task 1. So task 2. This can be priority and we'll say category 2, right? And it'll go to the column from here. So we're still having an issue with the reactivity of task being associated to other columns. So we'll definitely configure that. But now that the base columns are all packaged together, maybe the base columns component can query the data and pass it down to each base column. That seems a lot more sensible to me. I like that a lot more than doing the page with the data. I do like that a lot more. So I do think that opens the door for these solutions, and now we have kind of a robust thing, or kind of an interesting functionality, a robust functionality, I should say. But the problem we're going to have now is for all the project completions, right? These are our columns, it looks like, or our categories that I believe are measured based on which column that they exist in. So just because the columns don't exist, the statuses of where they exist still exist. So for instance, these tasks are still completed or partially completed because they still have a done status associated with them. And the done status is how we're measuring the completion of the task. So I do think that's going to be a different build, but certainly an interesting one nonetheless. I do like that we have this new functionality part of the we lost our shrinked version of the column. So a few bugs with this, but fundamentally we're packaging and putting it all together. Folks, I think that's an appropriate time to wrap up. We added the delete column functionality, and we also added the ability to assign to each column that functionality. So in theory, if I add a new column, we'll say new test column, this should actually add a new test column, the same thing here, but it should also add it to our task list. And just like that, it does. So that's incredible, folks. We now need to think about how to account for this for our project completion metric. And I do think we want to delete them out, or delete the statuses associated to these columns. Potentially, maybe we don't. Maybe we always want to have a timeline of where each task was, even if the task column got deleted. Maybe we could still maintain a timeline functionality for the task and say, oh, well, this one went to this column and this one went to this column. That way some project manager, team manager could still measure what task is doing what, despite the column maybe changing. So it would be a bit of a paper trail, a bit of an audit trail, I think, which is kind of a microservice that's a lot more work than considered. But yeah, I think a good functionality nonetheless. Folks, thank you so much for watching the Code Chronicles. Thank you very much again for at least considering the podcast bits. I do want to kind of introduce some of those ideas, or just interesting podcast takes. At least maybe something I can potentially provide value for, entertainment for. I know one of the episodes we talked about the alien thing, which is really interesting in the government as well. So. So maybe it will turn into a bit of a podcast programming thing, which would be kind of cool. So guys, thank you so much. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.